The smell of my burned daughter's teddy bear still clung to my clothes when the woman who burned my house walked into my courtroom, smiling like she owned it. Big mistake. She had no idea I was the federal judge about to destroy her entire empire. The smell of my burned daughter's teddy bear still clung to my robes the morning Constance Whitmore strutted into my courtroom, smiling like she'd already won. That same smile she wore while poisoning my late wife's roses with bleach. The same one when she conned our neighbors out of nearly 90 grand. The same one, I imagine, when she watched my home and every memory of my family turn to ash. But Constance Whitmore made one fatal mistake. She never bothered to learn who she was destroying. See, I'm not some random single dad she could bully into silence. I'm Federal Judge Thaddeus Morrison, and she just committed arson against the one man in this district with the legal power to end her entire criminal empire. 18 months of psychological warfare. One moment of reckoning. She thought burning my life would erase me. Instead, she handed me the match to burn her entire world down. But before we get there, let me take you back to where this hell began. 2 years ago, life was, dare I say, peaceful. I was 15 years into a federal prosecutor's career, proud of the work, and prouder still of the life I'd built for my daughter Zara. Our little blue Craftsman in Willowbrook Heights wasn't much, but it was home. White trim my wife Sarah had painted while pregnant. Tires swing out back that echoed with Zara's laughter. The place still smelled faintly of her perfume years after cancer took her. Neighbors waved when they mowed lawns. Mrs. Lucy down the street baked cookies for every new family. Kids played baseball until the streetlights came on. It was the kind of neighborhood where people left groceries on porches quietly, pretending not to know who needed help. And then the devil moved in next door. She arrived in a white Escalade so polished you could see your reflection in it. Constance Whitmore. Designer sunglasses. Bleached smile. Perfume thick enough to kill flies mid-air. Within 3 days, she was strutting around with a clipboard and business cards calling herself HOA Compliance Coordinator. Our neighborhood technically had an HOA, one that had been dead since the 80s. But Constance revived it like Frankenstein's monster. She started measuring lawns, photographing mailboxes, and interrogating retirees about aesthetic standards. Her first target? My mailbox, a hand-painted cast-iron relic my late wife Sarah had worked on while pregnant. A little rusted, sure, but it had history, her brushstrokes, her handwriting, her love. Constance called it non-compliant. Demanded I replace it in 48 hours or pay $50 a day in fines. That was my first mistake, assuming she cared about the law. I wrote her a polite letter citing the federal protections that prevent HOA harassment of government employees. I thought that would end it. It didn't. It began a war. 72 hours later, my doorbell rang. It was 6 a.m., and the sound of sprinklers hissing outside pulled me from my coffee. I stepped onto my porch, bathrobe, bare feet, and froze. Constance stood in my wife's rose garden, spraying something from a bottle. "Morning, Thad," she chirped like we were sharing neighborly gossip. The chemical stench hit me. Herbicide, industrial-strength poison, eating through the roses Sarah had babied through every Michigan winter. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted. She smiled, shark-like, solving our little bee problem. "Mrs. Peterson's granddaughter is allergic." There was no granddaughter. Mrs. Peterson was 87 and lived alone. Each pump of that spray bottle was like watching Sarah die all over again. Those roses were her heart, still pulsing in our soil. I told Constance to leave. She laughed, actually laughed, and said, "I'm protecting our community from your negligence." That night I sat in the dark watching the roses blacken in the moonlight. I swore it wouldn't happen again. The next day, I installed 6 security cameras. Years in prosecution had taught me one thing. Predators escalate. I didn't have to wait long. 3 nights later, 2:47 a.m., my phone buzzed. Motion detected. I opened the feed, and there she was. Constance, dressed in black, creeping through my backyard like a thief. She poured bleach onto the garden, then slipped fake HOA notices under my rocks. Perfect forgeries. Fake signatures, fake minutes, fake everything. But she made a mistake. One of those forged signatures belonged to Mrs. Lucy. The poor woman could barely hold a pen. I had video. I had proof. I had her. The next morning, I marched into the police station with my evidence. Sergeant Rick Bellows barely looked up. "Mr. Morrison, Mrs. Whitmore's a pillar of the community," he said, pushing the folder back across the desk. "Maybe grief's making you see things." Grief. That word stung worse than her poison. That's when I realized she hadn't just targeted my property. She'd poisoned the entire system. 3 weeks later, she went after my family. My sister Rebecca had driven 12 hours to celebrate Zara's birthday. Her beat-up Honda Civic looked like it had survived 3 wars, but it ran fine. We stayed up until midnight assembling a new bike for Zara, the smell of oil and laughter mixing in the garage. At dawn, pounding shook my front door. Zara screamed from upstairs. I ran outside barefoot, just in time to see a tow truck hauling Rebecca's car away. "Vehicle violation," the driver grunted. "No overnight guest parking." Behind him, Constance emerged, immaculate as always. "Community standards must be maintained," she said sweetly, handing me a glossy flyer announcing new guest parking restrictions. Dated the day before. The towing company logo stopped me cold. Bellows Recovery Services. Sergeant Bellows, his brother. They were in this together. I felt the ground tilt under me. That night, I started digging. County records, business filings, complaint logs, all roads led to her. 47 violations in 18 months. Every single one filed by Constance. Every target either elderly, single, or otherwise vulnerable. Cross-checking licenses revealed the ugly web. Constance filed complaints. Sergeant Bellows ignored evidence. His brother Richard ran the towing racket, shaking down victims for cash. It was a perfect triangle of suburban corruption. And I was the next point. 2 weeks later, she crossed the final line. She went after Zara. I was mid-trial when my phone exploded with calls. 12 missed in 30 minutes, all from my daughter's school. The messages still echo in my head. "Mr. Morrison, Zara says strangers are in your house." She's terrified, hyperventilating. I didn't think. I just ran. When I arrived, she was in the nurse's office, clutching her inhaler, shaking. "Daddy," she whispered. "They were taking pictures. They wouldn't leave." 2 men, cameras, fake IDs. They'd told my daughter, little girls shouldn't question authority. The police called it a legitimate inspection, based on anonymous safety complaints. But when I got home, I found a business card left behind. Morrison Property Assessments, LLC, registered that morning. And the listed inspector, Derek Whitmore, Constance's unemployed cousin, with a rap sheet longer than a CVS receipt. She'd created a fake company using my own name to terrorize my child. That night, I sat beside Zara as she slept. She ID taped together an old photo of Sarah teaching her to ride a tricycle, the one the tow truck driver had broken weeks earlier. "I can fix it if I'm careful," she'd whispered. That was the moment something inside me froze solid. This wasn't about neighbor disputes anymore. This was about evil. Small town, pastel-painted, smiling evil. And I had the power to end it. So I did. The restraining order was only step 1. With my evidence compiled and new federal oversight engaged, the dominoes fell hard. Fraud, forgery, harassment, false impersonation of government authority. Once the investigators saw the surveillance footage and financial trails, Constance's entire operation collapsed. Her compliance fund turned out to be a front for embezzlement. Bellows' brother lost his business license. Rick himself faced internal affairs review. And me? I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I stood in court weeks later as Constance entered. No more luxury clothes, no more smile. Just a trembling woman in handcuffs. She'd come to destroy me, but all she'd done was hand me the rope to hang her schemes. And as the gavel fell, I finally breathed again. I looked at the burn-scarred remains of Sarah's roses outside my window that evening, and for the first time, I saw new buds. Justice doesn't always bloom fast, but when it does, it's the sweetest revenge there is.